once more. I am the Great Boudini.
And I'm Sir Eats a Lot.
Lance, it's been a little minute since we've seen each other last. What has been going on in the world, sir?
Well, I kind of wanted to touch base on something we had talked about last time we recorded about the Tool record, because since then, Justin has been saying stuff like, oh, they're in the studio 4 days a week now, and they're really trying to get this thing together for release. But again, nothing too extravagant. The news is just trickling out now. It's happening more frequently, though, and I know people are going to want to hear about the Tool record. It's just something we need to cover.
I did say it might have been a little premature on my part when I brought it up with the album last time, but like I said, any news for Tool is still news, whether
Exactly.
It's far-fetched or whatever. It's almost like Bigfoot or UFOs.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and I know Maynard is just denying stuff left and right, but I mean, you got to roll with the punches as far as Tool news goes. So, yeah. But going on to more news, this is another progressive metal band. Opeth just announced an album, Sorceress, coming out sometime this fall. I don't know an exact date, but a song kind of leaked onto the internet. It wasn't, there's nothing official about it. It's just there now. And I've heard it a few times, like it's legit. This is the title track to the album.
Sorceress?
Yes.
Nice, okay. And
I gotta this is something Opeth hasn't ever done before, because with the last two records, they were going more on a harmony-driven, progressive rock. There's no death metal like at all in there, and that really divided some fans. But I still enjoyed the direction they were going. With this, though, it really feels like they're meeting that middle of the road point. Like, for example, in the beginning is the synth part that's kind of quirky, and it almost sounds something like Oingo Boingo would do in their heyday. But exactly, and then it just kicks in it's sludge metal riff,
right?
Which is so out there for Opeth. Like, what is going on? But they make it work.
Yeah,
it's awesome. The guitar in that song is great. And it still sounds like Opeth because you got these like grand church-like synths all over the place on top of heavy music. So,
didn't they play with the symphony one time?
Yeah,
did they?
And they played Blackwater Park in its entirety.
Nice.
Which, I mean, is definitely one of my favorites. But definitely check the song out. It's somewhere out there. The album comes out this fall. It's going to be great. Another band coming out with an album this fall is Meshuggah. Somebody found a snapshot of a picture of a magazine where this ad for their new record was in, but they haven't announced the record or anything. It was just an ad in this paper. So that's coming out in October. And they're touring on that as well.
Okay.
Starting in October, actually, like right after the album drops. So that's something to look forward to for all you prog metalheads out there.
Right.
And another metal tour that's happening is Megadeth, headlining a tour with Amon Amarth and Suicidal Tendencies, and then the openers are going to be Havoc, great thrash band, by the way, and Metal Church.
That sounds like a really good show. Actually, it really does sound like a good show.
And it's not coming anywhere near us, but it's still a tour that wherever you are, go check it out.
Absolutely.
I've seen Megadeth and Amon Amarth before, and they're both great.
Yeah.
So
I've seen Megadeth twice, and yeah, both times they were awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is another one of those like rumors, so don't get your hopes up entirely, but Billy Corgan has been talking about getting the original Pumpkins lineup back together.
I read this too, and I was really stoked. Stoked for Stokes, but I really was. I
haven't heard that one before.
Yeah. I had, when Guns had gotten back together and they were going to do some shows together, and Billy had said, well, if Guns can do it, more or less like, why couldn't maybe I do it? And that's, James came out on, what was it, one of the shows?
It was an acoustic tour. I think they touched a couple spots in Tennessee and like just wherever they wanted to go. Of course in Chicago. But
did James play the entire show, or was it just like one or two songs? Do you know? I mean, because I thought
I'm gonna just kind of plead the fifth on this one, because okay. I honestly read it, but I don't know all the details to say for sure.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, and then that's when he came out and he said that he's open for... The door is always open for certain members, and we know who that certain member was, and that's Darcy, to come back into the band, and I'm down. I would...
You're telling me?
I'd be...
You're telling me right now, they were... A couple episodes back, they were in that top 10.
Oh, hell yeah.
They're in that top 5.
Yeah, of course they are, dude. This is like when Soundgarden got back together with the original album.
Oh, yeah. People flipped their lid.
Hell
and
yeah.
the album, I think that album that they released, King Animal, it still holds up. I think it's pretty decent.
I can't
a
wait
lot of
for
songs
that.
I love on there. A lot of songs are like,
Right.
But it's still damn awesome.
It is. It was a pretty good rock album. But this... I just don't... I mean, are we talking about a greatest hits kind of tour, and then are we talking about new music, or are we just talking about maybe getting the band in together
see,
in a room and
that's the
saying,
thing.
hey, see if you guys can play together?
Since you were making the Guns N' Roses comparisons, I can kind of see them just doing like a reunion tour with no music.
Well, the Guns has said recently that they were actually thinking about doing new music too. So,
oh, really?
Yes.
Well, and the thing about Billy is that he's always writing stuff for Smashing Pumpkins. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Maybe he could just take this sound that he's been working with on albums like Oceania, or however you pronounce that, and then the newest one, Monuments to an Elegy, I think. It's something like that. But either way, they both have this like kind of grandiose sound to them.
Yeah.
Kind of shoegazy. They've always been kind of shoegazy.
And then you're going to add some James, and you're going to add Darcy. So,
and Jimmy. Jimmy's gonna change the sound, like put it on its head.
Yeah.
So
he's the balls of that band.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Oh yeah.
No sands or butts. But yeah, when I read that, I told a few people, and their reaction was the same as mine. Like, holy shit, this is really gonna happen. Yeah, well, we don't know for sure, but it's just talks right now.
Cross my heart, you know.
Yeah, hope to die. I mean. You've seen the Pumpkins twice with this last incarnation.
I've only seen them one time.
Okay,
and it was I don't remember what
you saw them,
but it was in like a very kind of pretty theater.
Was it a good show? I mean,
amazing. They played like some Siamese Dream and stuff too. Even though it's not the original Smashing Pumpkins lineup, they didn't disregard the classics like. Through the Eyes of Ruby was on that set. I remember that song like clear as day, Mayonnaise and stuff like that. But I mean, of course, that was on the Oceania tour, so they were playing a lot of stuff off of that. And either way, it was great. It was a very enjoyable show, and like for it being the only time I've seen the Pumpkins, like it was a great first impression.
Yeah. Well, I think especially from my generation and the cats that are in my age, this is our middle school, high school band or whatever. This is, our music. So kids my age are, just as fucking stoked as anybody else is. So
Definitely.
I hope it happens. I really do. It would be really great to see them finally bury the hatchet and do something together. I really do. Well, we actually we went and seen a show.
A special show?
Yeah, it was a special show. It was something that only... I had actually found out at the show that it was only their third time playing in Florida in their entire career. One was in 94, I think in Pensacola. And it was at some shithole, hole-in-the-wall kind of place. And then the second time was when they played at the Scion Festival. What was that, 2011?
With Down, right?
With Down,
yeah.
And this time, it was a special show because it was for the Pulse victims. And it was really, really cool. It was kind of like the heavy metal version of an auction. it was the heavy metal version because they would do this auction right before the show started. They would come out and they would sell an item or two, and they would sell it. The band would come on, they would play a set, stop, then they would do this 15, 20 minute auction where they would sell I don't know how much shit they sold, but they sold a lot of shit.
Well, you gotta tell us, who is this band?
The Mighty Sleep. We saw
Yes!
Sleep. Yeah. Sleep actually, because we're talking about stoner rock today, we figured why not kind of like lead this into the
and
stoner
that
rock
term,
topic.
stoner rock,
Yeah.
is kind of a loose thing because,
Right.
and for me in desert rock, I don't like that term either. I don't know what I'd call it honestly because it's kind of like you're segregating this music for a particular type of people,
Right.
and it's really not. I mean, I guess it gets its title for a reason.
Well, when you listen to somebody like Sleep, you hear what people would call them Sabbath heads. They're not Deadheads. They're not Floyd heads. They're Sabbath heads. Which means
and they put it on their sleeve.
They pray to Tony Iommi, and that shows. And it was an amazing show. We they played 2 sets, like I said. The middle was an auction where they sold stuff. I think they wound up making $6,000 or $9,000 for the victims.
About that much.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
That was pretty good, man. And then there was somebody that was in the crowd or that was a part of another group who was donating money and said whatever that they sold, he was going to double it. So if they made $9,000, then somebody else came up and here's another $9,000. So, but yeah,
That's amazing.
and it was a really good cause. The only problem I had about it was there was no merch, and I know it wasn't about the merch, but still, a band like that, I'm sure you guys had some shirts lying around. Say, hey, let's take 100 shirts. Let's
Yeah, or make
do
like
something.
a special
Poster?
shirt for that
Yeah,
show,
exactly.
to where you could buy the shirt.
Where
and
like
then-
it had like this. I was thinking about maybe like having the name Sleep, and then like having the rainbow colors for the Pulse victims or something like that.
yeah, like the logo.
But then
is
that
the
might
logo.
be a little too, popularizing the band. We're like, no, we're not really like, we're not like that kind of stuff.
I mean, I guess I can see that, but I mean, still, or they could put like Pulse and then put the date of the show
Right.
and the venue and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I stood in front of Al, the bass player, the entire night. And it was probably the one and only time that I can actually say that it was like sitting in front of a sonic wave. It literally was just blowing. And I've talked to other people too that was at the show. There were moments where I thought the actual place was moving. Like they were playing so hard and so fucking loud that they were making the fucking place move. And sitting in front of Al, and when I say sonic wave, I mean like I felt sonic frequencies like hitting my face all the time from his bass. And he had this fucking like this wizardy beard, like he was some kind of stoner wizard god, just there to play for us. And Al's he's really like stands in the shadow like most of the time. Like he doesn't really. They don't like to do interviews. Nobody was allowed to interview him for the show or anything like that. So there was nobody doing interviews for him. And then I found out that they regularly don't do interviews at all. And if you get them a chance to do interviews, mostly for like a movie or some kind of documentary or something like that, but they don't go out of their way just to do interviews.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's like Matt. I mean, I'm sure you could talk to Matt more than you could talk to Al. Matt's all about talking.
Oh yeah.
And the Mooch is here. He went with me.
Yes, I did.
We actually went together, and we had a mutual friend, Taylor, that was there. And tell what happened with that guy and you and Taylor.
I have no idea. Like, there was like this kid here who basically, when we were standing in the front with the great Boudini here at the rail here, and we were just rocking out, doing our thing, and then all of a sudden I just feel like somebody rushing in between me and Taylor, like he was trying to push us out of the way so he can get into the actual front, and then I was just looking at him like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like, what the hell's your problem? And I was
There's
like,
always a guy like that at shows. Though.
yes.
Well,
yes.
I even asked I looked over, and this guy, he first he was trying to come in between the two of them, and they kind of like, bumped him back, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then he came back again, and he kind of came between them again, but he put his arms around both of them like, hey, man, we're bros, we're at the Sleep show. And I looked over, and Marissa was like, who the fuck is that guy? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know who the fuck he is. I'm like, well, fucking kick his ass or something, dude.
Shit.
And so like Taylor, like, didn't he like hair whip his ass? Or
Yeah,
something like
what
that?
happened was that before he did that, security told the guy to calm down because
Right.
you're being an asshole. I guess he went to Taylor's right, they get to the actual barricade there, and he was just like rocking out and shit, and Taylor, just out of spite, he pretty much he was headbanging and whipping his hair literally to that kid in his face the entire time. Pretty much, eventually he got the hint that, he didn't want him there. So he just went and, went to the back like a dog with his tail between his legs and just, did his thing wherever he went to.
He was hair, like his fucking. I don't know if you've seen Taylor lately, dude, but Taylor's like fucking has long ass hair.
Yeah.
and he was whipping this guy.
If you want to be me.
He's like, oh, like that, and the guy's like, okay, all right, I guess I'm gonna leave here now. I'm getting beat the fuck up by this dude's hair.
Yeah, that was like during the first set that shit happened.
Yeah, but they pretty much played a classic set or two sets. They played, what was it? I think they played about the first 30 minutes of Dope Smoker, which led into From the Beyond, which there was an intro before the actual From the Beyond, and then after the Beyond, they played another 30 minutes of just some jam that was just going on, and it was fucking epic, dude. I mean, it's just, like I said, sonic waves, just the sound coming off the guys. They're literally like telling etiquette together just with the music, and fucking Matt's just fucking ripping this shit up, and Al's just, he's in weed heaven, or he's just up in the stratosphere talking to the aliens or whoever the hell he's talking to, dude.
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure, whatever. All in all, I mean, it was a bucket list band for me. I doubt I will ever see them again because they're one of those bands that if this had not happened, they would have never showed up here. The guy who actually put it together, didn't he live here or doesn't he live here?
I think so. I'm not too sure.
He was friends with Matt, and I guess he had talked to Matt, and then Matt was like, We'll get the band together and come out and do a show. So
sweet.
I mean, and it was for a great cause. All the money went to the victims, and it really was. It was, and there was actually cameras outside that were recording. I don't know if they actually. I didn't see anything on the news, but I know that Channel 9 was there. I saw the guy from Channel 9 News with the camera that was there. So
all the money that was paid for, such as the tickets, and even all the stuff that was auctioned off, all went to the to help the victims' families.
Yep. So it's not all about the devil. It's not all about evil shit.
No.
We love peace and love, my friends. That's all it's about.
And that's the ironic part too, is that people view rock or metal, metalheads, as this evil being, this evil entity, because we usually wear
because
all black.
Iron Maiden released Number of the Beast.
Yeah,
or bands like Venom come out and Hell Satan or
because they have albums called like Welcome to Hell and stuff.
But there were the bouncers or the security guys. I think every single one of them that were in front of the stage were black guys, and they had no idea what the hell was going to happen because I think they even asked us like, "Who's this band?" I don't know who this band is, and I'll just listen. And then one of the guys, when it got like literally to the end of the whole show, at the last bit of the jam, the guy looked up. He's like, "Man," he's like, "It's a badass fucking show, dude." He's like, "Fuck, man," and he's like going off. He's like, "It's fucking." He's like, "Yeah." He goes over to Taylor and he's like slapping Taylor's hands. And he's like, "I told you, free to enemy, dog." And he's like, "Fucking sleep." I'm like, wow.
So we turned security. So we turned the security from the Beecham to Sleepheads now.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Well, like you were saying, so about bands being evil and stuff like that, it gets a bad rep. I actually saw an interview recently where it's been scientifically proven, and I mean they've run tests and stuff like that, that metal music in particular really calms people down. It makes like everyone just kind of relax. It's weird because like you were just saying, Mooch was just saying, it's just ironic to think that particular genre of music is viewed like that, and its actual fan base is not. It's not Satan worshippers. It's not, violent people trying to screw shit. I don't know.
I'm not trying to be, to turn this into a racial thing or whatever. But I mean, when you look back on like gangster rap, that stuff gave most black people a bad rap when they're like, oh, that's a gangbanger right there because he's wearing a Raiders hat, and it's like, why can't I just like the team? Why do I have to be a gangbanger? Why do I have to be a gangster? Or I have to be a hood just because I'm wearing a Raiders hat,
or having their pants, down to their, down to their knees, showing off their boxers, walking around,
exactly,
shit like that.
But I mean, that's just the society we have. Then again, I mean, you did have Ice-T with Body Count having a song called "Cop Killer" that came out, which it is a depiction of fantasy. It's not true. Even I don't know how many times he's come out and said that I don't really want to hurt cops, but at that particular moment in his time or in his life, there was a lot of shady shit going on that shouldn't have been going on, a lot of racial shit that he was like.
I think in the censored version of the album, that song is excluded.
Oh, it is
something else.
But who would want to get that one? I'd want to get the Cop Killer version.
Yeah,
I mean, why not? But anyway, actually, I think we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We're actually going to start the episode. Is a episode on Stoner Rock, so tune in, and we will be back. And we're back. So earlier, I had mentioned that we were going to talk about stoner rock. And what more of a way to talk about stoner rock than talking about the Godfathers first, and that being Black Sabbath.
And by Godfather, I would say Godfather over metal, just in general.
I would say so. I mean, there is that where it was Sabbath, and then it kind of went to Judas Priest kind of deal. But it all goes back to Sabbath, and all is wrecked in the blues, and that is pretty much what true stoner rock, I think, is all reared in the blues. So we're going to talk about that today. Black Sabbath. The first 4 albums alone were just epic. I
mean, what a killer, just golden streak for music.
It was like album after album, hit after hit. They were sky high. I think they went to, what was it, California for the 4th album to record that one.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, that's when songs like Snowblind came out, because that's when they started doing lots of coke.
Yeah, I mean that's what that song's about.
Yeah,
is Ozzy's obsession with cocaine.
Well, there's something I want to know. Okay, now the actual song Black Sabbath and the name Black Sabbath, because at the time they were just called Earth. And Geezer was really into the occult and a lot of Satanist stuff.
So you've heard the story.
Yeah. Now, I've heard 2 stories. I heard the story about Geezer being asleep one night and then waking up and there being a black figure at the foot of his bed, and he woke up and he more or less, like, I wouldn't say found Jesus, but he was never doing that shit again after that. That's when he, like, just got rid of all that stuff. But then he told Ozzy, and then Ozzy went and wrote the song. I heard that version, but then I also hear the version about the movie Black Sabbath. So I don't know which one's true and which one's not. I guess that's...
I've only ever heard the first one, and
the first one,
that's believable to me.
Yeah, well, I believe it too, because I mean, even at the time, Geezer, when you look at Geezer in 69, 70, the dude looks like a sorcerer. he looks like a fucking warlock. I mean, yeah, it's just that whole incident changed that band forever. Well, that, and also Iommi losing his fingertips, and never...
That happened before Black Sabbath even like made it on the map.
Oh yeah, but the name change definitely worked for what they were going for.
Yep.
And when you listen to even like the first album, there's that what was that 14, 15 minute long song that's right at the end. The wall is sleeping. Amazing song. I listened to that one.
And I think that out of everything Black Sabbath would do is the bluesiest record.
Oh, absolutely. There was no, yeah, you're right. There was really no blues after that. It was all pretty much just Sabbath after that. After that album, that's when they found their niche. There really was no blues album.
Man, because that right there is Paranoid. Starting with Paranoid, and that's a musical classic, like up there with Dark Side of the Moon.
Absolutely.
And Nevermind and stuff like that.
Well, you can look back on it now and look at that album and be like, hit. Was it
like every song is just like, that's good, that's good, that's amazing.
That was played on the radio.
Although I will say, Pantera's cover of Planet Caravan is superior.
Yes.
Than Black Sabbath.
But that wasn't my favorite kind of ballady Sabbath.
And if we're talking about covers of Black Sabbath, that one and Typo Negative's cover of Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because he literally just slowed it down and changed the lyrics.
I prefer the Goat Snake version of "Who Are You" versus the one that was on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the one that's on that one, it sounded alright. It was something different. It was more of like a electronic, almost like Pink Floyd-ish type of thing.
Right.
But at least with the Goat Snake, they brought it back to what it was about. The loud guitars and just stuff like that. But,
definitely. And that's another band I think we'll get into momentarily.
Oh, absolutely. Like, that's a definite. Well, the singer alone, he shows up quite often in this little talk here.
This universe
little
of musicians.
Of stoner rock. He's definitely one of the guys in it.
So who else following Black Sabbath would you say kind of pioneered this genre?
I would say the next one would probably Hawkwind. Hawkwind, if anybody knows, was actually the first big time gig that Lemmy had when he got out of the Hendrix roadie job. He became a member of Hawkwind, and we've talked about it before. And I know you don't really care too much for Hawkwind, but Hawkwind for me is. I know I get a lot of flack for it, but I prefer Hawkwind over Motorhead. And the only reason why is because I love Lemmy's bass playing. I prefer Lemmy's bass playing. Oh man,
but I could argue that same thing when it comes to Motorhead.
I know you can. But it's a totally different animal. And the reason why it was because it wasn't Lemmy's band. He was just like, the bass player. And they're like, oh, you got a song, Lem? Okay, let's hear it. Yeah, okay, we'll put that on the album too. But Hawkwind. They were the godfathers. You could even say they were the godfathers of punk, rave. Nobody was doing that kind of stuff. And what I mean by that is when you would see them in concert, they wouldn't be the type of band that would play a song, stop, play a song, stop. Everything was interluded with each other. There were song like gaps, musical bridges into the next song, so the band would play for like 3 hours straight without even stopping. And I don't know what's this, but yeah, rave. Johnny Rotten said that if there was no Hawkwind, there would have been no Sex Pistols.
Did he say that?
That's what he said. He did say that. And of course, Lemmy being Lemmy. And he went off to form Motorhead, and that was...
The rest is history after that one.
The rest is history after that. That pretty much was the end. And I've even said before, I said, I only care for the first album all the way up until after Lemmy left. When that happened, the band was over for me. I mean, even though the band continued on, I never really gave a shit after that. And I know there's a lot of people who go I prefer this era or this era. It's always the early stuff with anything, but
most anything. Yeah.
You had actually what was that band you were talking about? St. Vitus.
Yeah, St. Vitus. Now, this is another band where I wouldn't exactly call them pioneers per se. Mm-hmm. They had something unique because basically, if you were to take Black Sabbath sound, lo-fi it, and then just make it super depressing. Like take Born to Die, for example. Like that album is just heavy with emotion, so distraught. I think that would continue on even further down their musical career. However, I think Wino lately has been kind of dwindling away from that typical St. Vitus sound, because you got to think now he's with bands like Shrine Builder, which has Dale Crover, the Melvins, and Scott Kelly, and that sounds nothing like old school St. Vitus.
Right.
So
I did hear that he was looking to get Obsessed back together. So the Obsessed,
was that recently?
Yeah, that's been like the past 2 months. He was actually talking about.
Oh, you know what? I might have missed that.
But I don't think, because I know Reader, who we will bring up a little bit later, he was actually in the Obsessed between Across the River and Caius. And he was playing with Obsessed when he got the call for Caius, and then, I was pretty much Obsessed with him.
Yeah.
But back to St. Vitus. I never got into St. Vitus. I listened to a little bit of their stuff just because it sounded like Sabbath, and I really enjoy that. What would you consider to be stoner rock?
Well, kind of doom metal,
doom metal, stoner fuzz.
If you want to talk about doom metal, Black Sabbath comes up in that as well, because especially with songs like
Hand of Doom,
which
is about heroin.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
listen to those words. Listen to those words. That's about heroin.
Well, all right, duly noted. But yeah, same thing there. That doom sound rooted in Sabbath.
Yeah,
all over the place in St. Vitus.
Well, even in Masters of Reality, you had
Into the Void. I knew you were going to say that one.
Love Into the Void, and
Children of the
Sweet
Grave.
Leaf.
Yeah.
Sweet Leaf. Which actually, I did find out in the beginning that coffin was actually Iommi hitting the bowl in the studio.
Wow.
Yeah. That is pretty sweet. when Godsmack covered that actually was a pretty good cover. Godsmack.
Did you know Mogwai covered that too?
I did not know that.
It's interesting.
Is it? Does it even sound like it?
It's heavy.
Is it really?
Because you know how Mogwai sounds.
Right.
They're really just downtrodden and kind of mellow. But when they get heavy, it's loud.
Yeah.
And that was good.
Was it really?
Good? And especially because I've seen them live. Like you were talking about a wall of sound with Sleep. That's what I felt with Mogwai when it got super crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the Mooch's ears were like. I know like my ears were pretty muffled. You know, that was
even still.
My ears were pretty bad that day. Actually,
yeah, it was. I think from like Tuesday night until maybe Friday, I was like this. You know, I had my ears. It felt like your ears were plugged.
Well, for me, it wasn't like that, but like earlier in the day, I was working during the day before I went to go. When we went to go to the venue together, but that whole day, like my ears, like they were all clogged up. Like I had to blow my nose to clear up my ears, but to no avail. And Sleep definitely made it much harder after that.
But yeah, I mean, I think bands, the Godfathers, I think they were the ones who showed the quote unquote guys bands what to do, whether it be Metallica,
basically
Slayer,
giving them the playbook.
Yeah. And that went for anybody. You know, anybody after Sabbath. I think Al from Sleep said it best. After Volume 4, it was all said and done. You had the blueprint. You had what you were going to do. And people just took it from there. And, you know, you had St. Vitus. You had people like that. You had doing fuzzed out, you know, really loud as shit, Iommi-driven guitar riffs and the slow
that were just monstrous. Like,
yeah,
I've seen them before.
I think it's so much awesomer to do slow and evil, you know, like menacing stuff like that versus like the threat, like okay, yeah.
Like the faster Sabbath songs. So you like the slowed down ones,
exactly,
like Into the Void,
right? Absolutely. I don't prefer. I prefer stuff like that. I like the other stuff, but the slower stuff is what gets you.
Yeah. I think I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Now, St. Vitus actually was on SST, which was Greg Ginn from Black Flag, which was his record label. And they actually had a few bands. They had Husker Du was on there. Dinosaur Jr. was on there. Who else? Soundgarden was actually on SST at one time, and also Across the River. Now, Across the River were the godfathers of desert rock. There's no ifs, ands, or two ways about it. They were. The bands that they went on to form afterwards are amazing. But I prefer.
See, this is where there's a fork in the road as far as our big subject for the day, because you go one way, you go to the stoner rock side of it with bands like St. Vitus, which is kind of more doomy, or like Monster Magnet, stuff like that.
Right.
Then you go in the other way, you get to the desert rock stuff. Like you were saying, Across the River is kind of heading all of that, trickling down to like Highest, the Desert Sessions, Queens of the Stone Age, etc.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting how this one kind of big sound created more and more subgenres. But I'm not picky. Like, I'm not like, oh, this is a pseudo psychedelic extreme metal rock, blah blah blah. I don't go super specific with that kind of thing. But it still doesn't. It's not rocket science to figure out which kind of sound goes where as far as rock music,
right?
You know, in all of its subgenres. So
well, that's like people have said before. It was in Caius. Somebody was interviewing him. They said, you guys are stoner rock, and something about Black Sabbath, and I think they were even like, we like Black Sabbath, but we're punkers who are stoners. This is pretty much what they said their music was. Yeah, we respect them guys, but those, Black Sabbath is just not our favorite band. And I think with the desert scene, that's where the whole stoner rock kind of changed a little bit, at least for the desert scene. I mean, I know if you go off and you listen to like Monster Magnet, especially the first couple Monster Magnet albums, what they were doing in New Jersey was just amazing. We're going to talk about Monster Magnet a little bit later,
right?
But as far as the desert scene goes, Across the River were the Godfathers. They were the guys who showed Josh Homme, who showed Caius, like, hey, this is what you could do, leaving like a blueprint. Because as far as I know, they were at the height. They could have been the greatest fucking band of all fucking time, and just went their separate ways. There was no no ifs, ands, or buts. There's just like, okay. And then if you ask somebody about it, it's still a question, like a thought in the air, like, why? You guys are right there. Go and listen to Across the River, the demos in 1985. It's on YouTube. It's the only way you can ever listen to it. Actually, Scott Reeder himself was the one who put it on YouTube. And he also has a fan site of Across the River stuff, which he put on it, I think 2 weeks ago, that there was going to be some show that they were going to put on there, like, soon.
Really?
Yes. And there was a picture. I don't know if it was just a publicity stunt or if it was just like, maybe, hey, like, we're still friends, we'll take a picture together. It was Mario, Scott, and Alfredo. And they were taking, it was like, across there. I'm like, okay, but then...
Really?
Yeah. I had mentioned something to a buddy. I'm in the Caius World fan page on Facebook, and they're like 10,000 strong or something like that. There's a lot of people who wear Caius World shirts. And one of the guys, Nathan, he said, what would be the epic show like we can do like a benefit show? Who can, maybe we can get actually Caius to get together for a benefit show, just for one show. And I said, well, we're in Dream World. I said, why don't we do Caius and Across the River on the same fucking thing?
Yeah.
And then he was like, yeah, why don't we do the Circus Leaves Town line? I'm like, yeah, sure. Scotty and fucking Alfredo can play in both fucking bands. That was the fucking rhythm section for both bands at that time.
Oh man.
But
yeah.
And then after the band broke up, Mario did his thing and he formed the Yawning Man with Gary Ace and Alfredo. And Alfredo actually was one of the founding members of Queens of the Stone Age. He did play on the very first Queens of the Stone Age album. I don't know if he toured. Did he tour with Queens on the first tour?
It might have been the first, because I mean, we were talking before the show, like Nick Oliveri was also on there.
Yeah.
They had the full band still, but I think Alfredo was a part of the band at the time.
And John McBain, too, I think he was a member of the band in the very early stages. That's another... John McBain was from Monster Magnet. It was another great guitar player, or a figure that will show up later on in this diabolical scheme.
Exactly.
But as far as that goes, I mean, we were talking about Caius. We both know what eventually happened of Caius and what eventually became of the members of Caius, or at least a few of the members, i.e. Josh Homme. We all know who this guy is.
Which, I mean, that guy is a part of so many things that make up, like, the desert rock essentials. Mm. You know, Caius being I would say the number one, because that's kind of where it all... How should I describe this? It kind of came to the surface with Caius. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best way I can describe it, because, I mean, with bands like Across the River, sure, it's like, this is a gold mine. Right. But then you get to Caius, and I'm trying to avoid the use of the word mainstream, because it's not mainstream whatsoever. Well, it's getting to a bigger audience and being exposed to more people, and the genre's getting more and more recognized. You know,
it's funny. I actually watched the Desert Age documentary today, and when they were interviewing Josh about Caius and stuff, he had actually mentioned there'd be people in the Palm Desert scene that'd be like, why are they getting out of here and playing fucking across the world, and we're not going nowhere, you know? And even Josh said, like, I was going down this road and I looked back and I knew then and there I was never going to be the same again. And, you know, certainly it still shows today. But what he was also saying was, like, you know, there was people out there, you know, who was definitely jealous that their band didn't make it, but even like with Across the River, there was potential for them to go on, and they did say they went to LA, played a little bit, it didn't go nowhere. And then I think by the time they got back, it just was deteriorating, and they really just wanted to stay in their neck of the woods. They didn't really... I guess they didn't really have any, interest in going off and playing around the world and around the country or anything like that, or getting in the van like
right, because they'd still
did.
get like the same response.
Right, but I mean that would just be, especially with the demos out and the possibility of the long lost show that they found at the Viper Room last year when Fatso Jetson played there.
Yes,
there is still a mystique about that band that even with Nick Oliveri, people would come up to him and say like, "I seen Caius. When did you see Caius?" And that's like across the river. Only people who seen across the river were people who were living in that area. Nobody from Orlando or from New York, unless they were visiting somebody from a family, were like, "Yeah, we're gonna go see Across the River tonight." There's very few and far between people who actually got to see that band, and like I said, there's a certain mystique about that band, and it's just gonna come out eventually. I hope so.
I hope so too, man.
I mean,
because from what I've heard, it's just.
But even
like you said, they were right there.
Right there.
It was right on the cusp.
And I don't know. It might not be nobody's fault. I don't know if it probably just were like, hey, let's break up the band. Kind of like the Police. They went out on top. Why
I know they knew when to quit.
Yeah, we're like, hey, we're out of here. You just had the biggest album in the fucking world, and you're out of here. Oh yeah.
Because they said exactly what they wanted to say.
That was it. And then we know that from Caius, Josh he didn't just form Queens at that particular moment. He actually went and joined up with Screaming Trees. He played, guitar with him. I don't think he actually ever was on an album.
No.
But I know he did tour with them as a guitar player. And that's
I think just temporarily before he started getting like really serious with the Queens project.
Right. Well, I think the Desert Sessions happened before the Queens project. Because I think, if I remember correctly...
Yeah, no, that's right.
I read it on Wikipedia that the first of the Volume 1 and Volume 2 or maybe just the first volume, was actually supposed to be demo tapes for his new band. And it was him, John McBain, I think Mario Lally might have been in there, and Ben Shepherd played bass.
What? Ben Shepherd?
Yeah, and...
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Ben Shepherd was on the very first one. Yeah.
If only the people listening could see my face.
and the guy we had actually mentioned about Goat Snake, Pete Steele, Pete Stahl. Sorry,
to be like Peter Steele,
Pete
man.
Stahl, who was actually Scream.
That's not even a band we can talk about on this. Well, actually, I already did. They brought up the Sabbath cover, but anyways,
good side note.
Yeah,
but Pete Stahl, he was another one who actually showed up in the desert sessions, who actually formed the band The Earthlings with Dave Ketching, who's shown up in the Desert Sessions as well as played on the Queens of the Stone Age albums. The Desert Sessions took a mind of its own. We could sit here and talk about the Desert Sessions for an entire episode about the cast of characters that is played on the sessions, the revolving door, everything. Unfortunately, the Desert Sessions are very much out of print.
Isn't it like $250 for a box set?
I don't know about no. I've seen LPs going for like over $1,000.
Oof.
Yeah, one time I seen an unopened, brand new copy of the first two volumes. It was like $1,500. It was on eBay.
That is wild.
I said no, dude. I'll wait the 20 years or however long else we gotta wait until Josh decides to put out a Desert Sessions box set. Which that I would do like how I've said before. I would get it on vinyl. I probably would then get it digitally, but the vinyl I would just put away. I probably would never play it just because I have it digital. Why do I have to play it? And then it would just go there and collect it. Yeah, and then it would just sit over there and just collect dust and just, collect value, like how you said. Because of course he's not gonna make that stuff like extremely easy to get. He'll probably do like so many copies a run and then stop it.
Yep, like a limited print of 1,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would be one of those guys that gets it. But the Desert Sessions...
And here's the thing about that is that I don't know how willing he is to do another Desert Sessions based upon... I'm only saying this based upon what he's been doing lately. Mm-hmm. So we both know we just got done with Iggy Pop, which, by the way, that record is great.
Yeah.
That Iggy Pop record with Josh and then the guy from Arctic Monkeys is also on there.
Okay.
And it's great.
Nice.
So
Troy wasn't on that, was he? No, Dean. Dean from Queens and also from Dead Weather was in that band, too.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Josh. In a recent interview, when I say recent, I'm probably like within the last year or two. They were asked him about a desert session, and he's like, "I like to do a desert session, but there's only really once a year we can really do a desert session, and trying to get people's schedule closed is usually how we have to do it. Like that person has to have a." And he said it's always. Like on the downtime before they go and they make their other big band, whatever their big band is.
Like Queens, because like we said before, they're on lockdown. So, and that's what I was going to say too, is that he's devoted to that now after Iggy Pop. So, God only knows.
Yeah, and I mean, I love pretty much anything he's ever done. I love his guitar style, I love his swagger, his vision, his ear, everything. I love the guy. Amazing fucking artist. There are so many things that I wish that he would just, like them Crooked Vultures. They made one album.
Yeah,
and it was like
great.
It was like what 6-7 years ago, and they didn't even really do a proper over in Europe. They did a proper run, but here in America, I think they might only play 20 places, 20 shows, including the Jimmy Kimmels or the David Lettermans of the time,
right?
To promote the album.
Of course, they're going to want that band because it's 3 members of
three
multiple
of the
projects that
great
are
bands.
Yeah,
and we're sitting there. It's kind of like, okay, when you can do, okay, you're gonna do a Queen's album. What about Dave's doing Foo Fighters, can't do that. Okay, then Dave's free. Oh well, now we're thinking about maybe doing something else.
Yeah, and JPJ's just like sitting around like in his house, like I don't want to do.
Yeah,
because he's. From Led Zeppelin, that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, I don't really think he started up for money. I mean, I'm sure it's not like Page and Plant.
No, but he does it because he wants to.
Exactly. That's people like him. They always do things because they love to play. But up to that point, you didn't heard about John Paul Jones. I mean, he more or less produced music, and if he did play, it was more or less either like session work. Or he might sit in. I don't really think he actually had a band up until that point, or was a part of a band. I know he produced. I think
you're right about that. Yeah,
I know he produced, and he did work a little bit with REM at one moment. I'm not sure on what album, but I know I did hear he did work with REM for a little bit.
I did not know that, actually.
You did not know that.
Was it like an older REM record? Because here's the thing about REM. I haven't ever really dived headfirst into their discography. But I know an album here or there. Is it like one of the older albums, or is it more recent?
I really couldn't tell you. It was just like in a magazine interview or one of those things. It was like, oh, he worked with REM. Okay, I didn't really say what album. They just said I worked with REM. Okay,
right, well, go look that up, folks.
Yeah,
we have no idea.
Well, and also we're still in the desert scene. We know what happened with Josh. Now, with the original drummer of Caius, Brant Bjork, when he left Caius, he actually joined another band, which we will first talk about that band, that being Fu Manchu. I think Fu Manchu, in the very first 3 albums, that was... If there was the desert's sound, or whatever you want to call it. It's like the desert's
punk music.
Yeah, and that's it. And those first 3 albums were the heaviest. The singer even said so. He said, even in an interview, he said, when Eddie was in the band, that being Eddie Glass, who would later form Nebula, when he was in the band, he was more about the crunchy, the heaviness, the riff, I'm
sure Scott Reeder was all over that.
Oh, he was. And once Eddie left, because Eddie got tired, and he was like, I want to form my own band. So him and the original drummer, they left and they formed Nebula. So, and I guess with Brant needing a job, he went in and he joined Fu Manchu, and then they made Action Is a Go, which is actually a phenomenal album.
That's my favorite. Also,
Don't you own that one? Action Is a Go.
It's a white and purple LP.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wait, was that a limited edition one too?
Well, because you got to think, it wasn't an original run, but when they repress albums under a label like that, they're gonna make like exclusive variants at a certain number. So like that one's probably got like 300. And I think I have No One Rides for Free too.
Okay, that's a good one too. No One Rides for Free. That's probably I like Daredevil. I think Daredevil was my favorite. No One Rides for Free is my second, and then
What about the Godzilla one?
That one was. When was that one? That was like 2000. I think that was the one that had Squash That Fly on it. Don't you know my name? Now on the cover, Action Is a Go. That actually was Tony Alva from the Lords of Dogtown or the Dogtown.
Yeah, he's the one riding the board,
and he, of all people, is a hero. He's a legend in his own right. He was probably the one who, more or less, like invented the skate of modern day, of the equivalency of the X Games or the craziness and shit like that. Those were the guys who originally, went in and skated the pools and stuff like that. They were the originators, and that was actually in the desert scene as well. They would play this. It was a nudist colony that opened up in the 50s, and then it closed in the late 70s, and then it just was there. And there was like it was really strange because there was like this fucking swimming pool that was built into this mountain, and so there's a swimming pool and there's like this mountain and stuff, and that's pretty much where they would play their generator parties and stuff like that. Yeah, that's another thing is the generator parties. They couldn't play anywhere, so they would just like, hey, let's get a generator and just go out in the desert and we'll have our own concert. And they actually had to have maps, and they had lookouts for cops and stuff for people who are trying to bust up the party and whatever. But it doesn't really go on today because, shit's changed. I'm pretty sure the police are aware of what happened. So,
right.
But yeah, actually Mario, he bought a bar. Because he was tired of getting nabbed by the cops, so he bought a bar and he would just play That's pretty much where the bands would go to play, and they have, probably Caius played there, Queens, Earthlings, anybody who's anybody has played at his club, but he unfortunately had to close it because of money problems. But he still tours with Fatso Jetson and Yawning Man. But yeah, Fu Manchu was an interesting band, but I prefer Nebula over Fu Manchu just because Nebula was a lot more harder and rougher, and they were more like jammy and not so much about, like I said, with the desert scene, the music seemed like it was more about the music than it was about the lyrics or about the singing and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, which isn't a bad thing. I would say it's even better.
Yeah.
I like what Mastodon said, like we brought up in the last episode, how the music has to come first. Mm-hmm. That's how I view it too. So
absolutely, Nebula. There's not too much I could. I know Nebula now is on. They've been on hiatus for, I don't know, like over 10 years. They still haven't got back together. So I don't know.
That's the case with a lot of stoner rock, desert rock bands.
Even like Fugazi. Fugazi's been on hiatus since 2002. They're not officially broke up, but they're not together. And then, of course, Mudvayne, we found out it went from indefinite hiatus to...
Oh, yeah. Fugazi, though, man. I love, 13 songs and stuff
13 songs.
So it's a real shame to hear that. I didn't even realize, because I just didn't expect to ever see Fugazi in my lifetime, and I probably never will.
No. So. And at one time, their shows were $5. It was $5 for a show. And... then I think eventually they had to start charging more, so then it became $6 a show.
Yeah, and everybody was so mad about that.
I was like, oh my god, $1! But there was no merchandise. There was no nothing. There was actually a guy who made a bootleg shirt of a Fugazi. I think it said, "This is not a Fugazi shirt." Well, that's the first half of the of this discussion. I know we spent a lot of time in the desert scene. The Yawning Man is a band that is more of like a surfer.
And see, that's not a one I'm familiar with. So
Yeah, you need to check. It's just a jam band. There's no lyrics. Very Dick Dale-ish, like surfer rock, but
Now you have my attention,
more
like-
jammy.
So it sounds like a Dick Dale stoner rock child.
Yes, absolutely. Lolly plays bass, Gary Ace plays the guitar, and Fredo plays the drums.
I
Ace,
can get with that.
Yeah, I'll send you some later, and you can check it out. Definitely, the desert scene and the Godfathers of the stoner rock. I really, it's so far it's a genre that it's still misunderstood. I really think that even when we went and seen the Sleep show, how we were saying how before the Sleep or even like metal in general is not all about the devil. It's not all about evil shit. It's about good and people or whatever you want to call it.
In a way, like, and this might be a stretch for some people, but I feel like it's kind of bringing a better side to people. It's improving people's lives, because it gives them that outlet.
Yeah.
I think that's not justifying anything. It's not justifying like unnecessary anger or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, overall, it kind of rounds you out a little bit, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
It's just all music's like that for me, but I understand why people gravitate towards metal because, well, I'm sure I'm sure the Mooch knows. We all know because we're all fans, so anyone who's a fan of metal really understands why.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to wet our whistles, and we will be back for the final act. So we return for the final act. Now, I did not want to make this episode strictly about desert rock or about the godfathers of stoner rock. I want to talk about other mentions, such as a band that should be mentioned just as much as Caius or as much as
Sleep, yeah,
for that matter, and that's Monster Magnet. They came from Red Banks, New Jersey, or actually was the hometown of Kevin Smith, Silent Bob himself.
All right.
Didn't know about that until years later, but their first album actually was an album called Spine of God. There was a debut album on the major label, so to speak, but they had a couple albums beforehand on some indie labels, such as Forgot About Life, I'm High on Dope, We're Stoned, What Are You Gonna Do About It, and the famous Tab album.
Of course.
And Tab is actually probably more or less a reference to Tab as an LSD acid.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Now, go listen to that.
Don't do drags.
Don't do drags. And listen to that song, or even that album for that matter, and you'll understand what was going on at that particular moment when that was going down. And then after Spine of God, John McBain himself, who I had mentioned in the Desert Sessions, who was actually in the first incarnations of Queens of the Stone Age, he left the band, and then I guess he moved out to the desert. I guess that's what happened. I guess he left the band and moved out to the desert. But he actually was the original guitar player. And then they got Ed Mundell, who played on Super Judge. Now, I will say, and I know probably there's a lot of Monster Magnet fans out there that probably will, scold me because I didn't listen to Super Judge, but for some reason I always skip Super Judge and I go right to Dope's Infinity.
But the thing is, like I was talking to you about this before we started this part of the podcast, that's honestly just the Monster Magnet record. I think that's the one where they did it. Those are Nevermind, so to speak. Although it is kind of in the shadows of Power Trip because it's got like some of their biggest songs on it.
Right.
But
I don't know. It's always between Dopes and Spine of God for me, at least. I love the vibe of Spine of God. I loved how when people, even like when you think about stoner rock, I mean, and I mentioned Spine of God. That's probably like one of those stoner rock albums, the essential stoner rock albums that everybody will flock to. And I will tell you all now, check out Spine of God. Amazing record.
Talk about a debut, right?
Exactly. Killer fucking debut. But the Dopes to the Infinity, that was the start of the big stuff, of the big time, where they're not so much a stoner band anymore. We started becoming a good band, we're
like a straight up rock band, and exactly. I mean they still had that like space rock tag on them.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I definitely see where you're coming from on that.
I remember listening to. I was really big into soundtracks when I was younger, and I got the Matrix soundtrack, and there was a song called "Look to Your Orb" on there from Monster Magnet, and I didn't really give a shit too much about what was rest on the album. I really loved that song. And I think I went out and I had to go to probably the mall because Best Buys at the time, they don't carry long lost records or hard to find records. They don't.
Not like they do today.
No. But so back in those days, you either had to go to a record store or you had to go to the mall and pay God knows how fucking much more for an album, like $22 for an album at the mall at the time, which is fucking crazy. But anyway, I would do that, especially for an album like that. I would buy an album like that. Just I didn't care how much it was, and I bought it, and then I was more turned on even more. But I had listened to Power Trip coming up as a kid, with Power Trip and
Space Lord.
Space Lord.
And see, the thing about that, for me being like kind of younger, like wasn't really exposed to Monster Magnet until I was like 16 or so.
Yeah.
That's the one song I knew, and then like hearing a different song made me be like, aren't those guys that made Space Lord? So then it made me go back and like I listened to Dopes to Infinity because I didn't know what album that Space Lord was on. I listened to that album and was like, jaw on the floor. That's
the way they do it. I mean, but even when they but when Space Lord came out and that song they were playing, and at the time a lot of hip hop artists were having girls in their videos dancing and shaking their ass and just doing whatever, grinding up on guys and whatnot. And I guess Monster Magnet had the idea, hey, let's have some hot girls come out and dance with Dave on the guitar. So that was another element to it too. Was wow, this
like,
fucking band is like all over MTV, all over the radio at that particular moment in their career.
It kind of reminds me of what Josh Homme said, like when he was talking about how he wants to bring sexy to rock and roll.
Yeah,
it's kind of in that same vein.
Right. But kind of after the Power Trip thing, you didn't really hear I mean, they released albums, but it never reached that peak again, and it still hadn't. I think with the song Silver Future, which showed up on the Heavy Metal 2000 soundtrack.
Oh, that's right.
Which later showed up on Melodic Baby. I think that song was another good one. That was probably, in my opinion, I think that was probably the last big song they've released. I mean, I know they've released a couple songs since then, but nothing along those lines were the next big thing. No,
unfortunately.
But they had they had
a sound going for them for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, they're a great band.
What was that one band you were talking about? Orange Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
great band.
Talk to me about them.
This band is, I think they're from England. That's right.
Yeah.
So they're based out of the UK. Mm-hmm. So they've released a lot of what I think are kind of stoner metals, psychedelic rock,
right?
Essentials.
Well, John Garcia was actually on one of their albums.
Yep, that's right. Time Traveling Blues is probably where I'd start because I mean, their original vocalist Ben Ward is on there.
He's still the original. He's still the vocalist.
Wait, really? Because I thought it changed with the latest album. It didn't?
No.
Okay.
He's still with them.
To my defense, I didn't listen to that record.
Okay.
Because I heard it wasn't good. If anybody's listened to it and thinks it's good, you can convince me to listen to it. But I was like, oh, okay. Well, if they're just one of those bands that's going to die out, then eh. But I mean, they had like Frequencies from Planet 10. Mm-hmm. The J.B. amazing. And then following it up with Time Traveling Blues, like, that was...
And what was the one? It was Coupe
de Grace.
That was the one that actually had John Garcia from Caius on that one. He did the guest vocals for...
Yeah, the cover of that album kind of looks like a comic book.
It does.
Yeah.
I always thought it was kind of like a rip-off of Misfits, like the Fiend Skull, but a little bit more deranged.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Children of Bodom in a way, because it has the Grim Reaper look.
Now... You did mention Electric Wizard earlier today, okay? Now, Orange Goblin and Electric Wizard did a split together in the UK. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been a fan of Electric Wizards for a lot longer than Orange Goblin because, I mean, honestly, as much as I like the genre, it's not one of my favorites. But there are certain bands that grab me. Obviously, Caius and Monster Magnet, but then Electric Wizard, dude, like, okay, so yeah, they're kind of evil looking. They talk about evil stuff and all that, but if you look past that, it's literally. I said during our top 10s that Neurosis was the heaviest band I'd ever heard, and I still stand by that. But if they never existed, then this would be that band.
But only in the defense of Electric Wizard, their writings are what they would consider fiction. Like, they don't believe that they can actually happen, even though
because I mean, like,
they talk about a satanic rite, or a covenant,
or like
or
the Cthulhu, or something like that. Talking about vampires, but it's
Dope Throne wasn't that the album that had the devil taking bong hits on the cover?
Is it a devil? Because
it was supposed to. Well,
I know that there's like trees with faces in the background. That and the whole thing's like in black and white. So,
well, Revolver said that it was the devil taking bong rips. So,
well, then that clears it up.
Yeah.
But anyways, like,
I'm not really.
That's their magnum opus, so to speak, is Dope Throne.
I don't know. I like the Come All You Fanatics. That's probably my favorite.
Yeah, that one is probably my favorite as well. Come My Fanatics, because especially with that first track, is quintessential like stoner rock, stoner metal,
stoner doom.
The Doom for sure.
Yeah,
that's a Sabbath worshipping band right there.
Absolutely. We had mentioned Sabbath heads about Sleep, and Electric Wizard is definitely another Sabbath head band. I mean, they take literally it in the title: Electric Wizard, Electric Funeral, and The Wizard.
The Wizard.
Come on, it's right there in the title, dude.
Again, with those Easter eggs that we've been mentioning.
I love bands that do that. The Easter eggs galore are all over the place.
But yeah, just it's basically Black Sabbath doing a Spinal Tap and turning it up to 11.
Absolutely. But I liked Saturn Returns. I think was the song. It was like 13 minutes or something like that.
They're known for their lengthier tracks too.
I think on what was that last one that came out? Was that Black Mass that came out last?
No, not Black Mass. It was there was a newer one. It was all right.
It was all right.
That's what I thought about Black Mass. I think the last decent one was Witch Cult Today. Like, that one was solid all around, I think.
Was it?
But yeah, Black Mass kind of lost me, and so did this one. I don't know.
They're also a band that really doesn't play here in America. I think they might have played once.
They hate it here.
Do they hate it here? Why do they hate it here? They have
like any other
fans,
UK band does, dude. Like, of course, like bands like Judas Priest and Maiden love their fan base and know that there are plenty here. They're another band that just doesn't like to tour outside of Europe.
Wow.
Or, okay, scratch that. They love to tour Europe the most, but they will tour anywhere except here.
Yeah.
It seems.
Well, that's what happened with Queen. The last hit song, the last song they tried to get here was "I Want to Break Free." In the video, they were dressed in drag, and there was some kind of joke that didn't transcribe from English, from their kind of, humor to our humor, and they didn't get why these guys were dressed in drag, and whatever. But after that, they lost America.
Yeah, and now in America we have like RuPaul's Drag Race and stuff. Isn't it weird how that works?
And Freddie, he said that he would never tour America again if they didn't have a hit song. And I guess they never did have a hit song here in America again. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean,
maybe we just scare people.
I guess
with our McDonald's and terrible TV sitcoms. But anyways,
well, I mean, even Electric Wizard, they're one of those bands that I never really was 100% into, but I still gave them a listen to, and I still listened every now and then. I'll put on Electric Wizard, like Come On My Fanatics, and just put that one on and see what goes on. But another really good, I would say, even Greg Anderson, the guitar player, he would consider the band. He's like, I don't know what that term means, stoner rock. He's like, we're a rock band. And I'm talking about Goatsnake. I had talked about Pete Stahl from before with the Desert Sessions, and he had actually, when he did a band with or the Earthlings with Dave Ketching, who was showed up in a few Queens of the Stone Age. Actually, he was a member of Queens of the Stone Age for a little while. Yeah, Pete and Greg.
This is another Scott Reeder one.
Yeah, Scott Reeder was actually in this band too. I know he played on the Sabbath cover. I'm not sure exactly how much he played in the band, but I know he played on that song.
Yeah, because he wasn't on their first record.
No. But Flowers of Disease, that was a great album. Their newest album, Black Age Blues, there's a picture of a church, and if you listen to the vocals, or at least Pete's vocals, it's almost as if he's preaching. There's even a song where you hear choir singing in the background.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
And I remember I was freaking out when the stuff was coming out, and I remember I was telling everybody, I was like, "You gotta listen to this song." It was 15 years in the making. Like they hadn't had a new album out in 15 years, which is something. But they had been kind of active, just playing gigs here and there. But
It seems like a lot of bands love to just do that. You know?
Right.
Like, we'll play like a couple one-off gigs and then disappear for another couple years.
You brought up Hum before. How Hum would do that. How Hum would only
Yeah,
play.
but now it seems like they're really getting serious about making music and stuff again. But that's, totally different beast.
Yeah.
Another band I thought about, but I wasn't sure if it would be entirely appropriate. Unless you want to keep going on about Goatsnake, actually.
Yeah,
That's
not
fine.
really. I mean, that was pretty much all I wanted to say. If anything...
Dog Days EP.
Dog Days. Dog Days was their first two EPs. They were first two, and they put them together, and that was amazing EP. Check it out. You will never find a better singer than Pete Stahl out there, dude. Amazing singer.
Yeah, great one.
I mean, we're talking about Electric Wizard being like a really heavy fucking band, almost to the point where it makes you want to take a shit, because like it's just so heavy, it's just
Yeah, you gotta wash all that heaviness off you.
Yeah,
In the
but
shower, just wash it all off.
But in the same sense, like I mentioned before, it's true. Like stoner music, it goes back to the roots, goes back to the blues, and a band like Goatsnake. They do that. They're heavy as fuck, yeah, but they definitely know how to play the blues.
Exactly.
Such as a song like Easy Greasy, or even Coffee Whiskey off the
Hot
new
Rod.
albums. Yeah, Hot Rod. That was actually a really funny song.
Yeah.
That was a really funny
It
song.
ended up on that one compilation.
The Dog?
The Rise Magic, or the Rise 13 Magic Rock Volume 1, or whatever it is.
Okay, I'm not really sure. I'm not really too
It
sure.
was released on Rise Above.
Okay.
So it's got other bands on the label like Electric Wizard.
Right.
So
Oh, well, I'm sure that probably didn't. That would probably show up on the Dog EP, because the Dog EP was a collection of all their EPs. I wasn't really. I didn't know any of those albums. It was just pretty much I got the Dog album, and they all were on there. I was like, oh, okay, well,
yeah,
I don't need any of that shit.
and the
because-
one plus whatever that is.
Right. Now, that was pretty interesting stuff. The song like 4 that was on there was an interesting, a really good bluesy tune. And
You could say that for pretty much any Goatsnake. That's
oh yeah, well I mean even they always find some way to bring in the fucking harmonica. Pete loves to play the harmonica, and that, like I said, that goes back to the old blues stuff. Greg, he also is actually in the band Sun. He and I think Billy Anderson. I'm not too sure. They are the ones who run the record label, Southern Lord Records, which
That's right.
Sun's on.
Sleep got repressed off of that.
Yes, the Dope Smoker. Dope Smoker. We were trying hard not to talk about Dope Smoker, but Dope Smoker got mentioned. It actually originally, they called it Dope Smoker, but then the record label cut it down to called Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jerusalem.
And then they re-released it. So Yeah, and that guy actually is. I think he's in Sun too. I think he plays guitar in Sun.
Yeah,
but
I'm probably gonna be crucified for saying this, but I think I might as well just say it to spice things up here. Joe Smoker's awful.
Yeah,
it's okay. So I know you have your reservations,
right,
and most people probably do. But my thing is that I see it working well as like an interlude. I think that would be a perfect place between two songs, like in Holy Mountain. Like, whoa, that would be a killer.
That would be.
I see where they're going with this, but it's literally like audio torture to go and sit through 63 minutes of that. Like, Norah Jones does more in 4 minutes than they do in 63.
Well, even
or DRI does more in 2 minutes than they do.
Well, even how you said about when we were talking about Monster Magnet's Tab, that song was only like 33 minutes. That Monster Magnet did more in 33 minutes.
Yeah, that's an amazing jam. Like, that's a jam that really knew where it was going. But
right.
And don't get me wrong on this. I like Sleep. You know, Holy Mountain is like way up there in some of the best albums of its genre. And Volume 1 is great too. But I mean, I just can't get past Dope Smoker. I just can't do it.
Well,
and I've given it fair chances, but every time it makes me want to beat my head against the wall, and not in a good way.
You know me.
Lynch me.
No, there's no lynching going on here. You know how I love long songs. But there comes a time, and I love Dope Smoker. When we saw them, they played probably the first 30 minutes of Dope Smoker, which, all due in fairness, that's pretty much the only thing I can listen to. Even after 20 minutes, or even when it gets to the 30-minute mark, I'm like you. Can I please turn the fucking chant? Oh, that's right. I got another 30 minutes of this.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna just leave it at that. I respect it for what it is. I do. I think people are praising it, and I understand why. I myself just can't get into it.
Well, see, and there's a lot of other stoner rock bands, such as like Earthless, that they don't sing, they just jam, and that's their whole gimmick. They are a jam band. They are a instrumental band that just goes off. They have a song, well, they did a live album called Live from Roadburn, both songs which I think the first one was right at like 52 minutes long, and the second one was I think 34 minutes long. But if you like that kind of music, if you like just straight up jamming, and it wasn't the same riff as a Dope Smoker. There was sections in it that they played this one version all the way up until like maybe 20 minutes, and then they stopped, and then they broke it down to another part, and then they went somewhere else with it. But that's what's awesome. I like stuff like that, but even songs and bands like that I kind of get bored with because the jamming. I mean, I love jamming, but 52 minutes on one song, it's great and all, but sometimes it does get a little boring. But now when you throw in, when Earthless did the Heavy Blanket mix-up, when they did the...
with the guy from, what you call it?
Jay
Dinosaur
Mascis.
Jr.?
Yes, he actually has a stoner band, his own stoner band called Heavy Blanket. Check it out, it's an amazing band. But if you really want to know why Jay Mascis is actually an awesome guitar player, check the Dinosaur, well not Dinosaur, but the Heavy Blanket meets Earthless live album from Roadburn, of all places, and you'll see it. I mean, but you know, I'm not ripping on anybody because I love the stuff. It reminds me of like the Cream. That's exactly who Earthless reminds me of. It reminds me of a Cream offshoot.
Really?
Absolutely. I don't know if you pay attention to listen to Earthless, but it's a very good instrumental, great band. That they're just amazing.
What about the band Earth?
Because
you keep saying Earthless, and I'm like, for some reason my mind goes to Earth, and they kind of fit in this. I think
I've listened to them a couple times, but I know they're more of the instrumental. Rock.
Yeah, like a band like Pelican is.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with their stuff to talk about it, and I'm not even going to attempt to talk about it because there might be an Earth fan out there, but like that. That fucker don't know what the hell he's talking about, so I'm not even going to try to talk about Earth. But
and people probably think the same thing when it comes to me, in my opinion, on Dope Smoker. Like, I'm sure people are going to listen to this and be like, "Are you serious?" Like, what? It's not that I haven't given it a chance. I still like it.
Yeah.
It's just...
Well, and it's like Earthless. I mean, Earthless is...
Yeah, because they go on for
They are. They probably
feels
are.
like hours.
They are probably the three greatest musicians that are in rock music today. Isaiah Mitchell, who is the guitar player, is probably one of the most underrated guitar players who probably will never get discovered, other than in the rock, or like the guitar world. He is known for certain people, but it's not like Eric Clapton or
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, something like that, and that's sad. Because the fucker is, like I said, he's one of the greatest guitar players out there, but he's very underrated. Never, you say Isaiah Mitchell, and they're like, "Who's that?" Or even if you like Dead Meadow, if you bring up Dead Meadow, a lot of people don't know what the hell that is, and that is a really good. We go back to the blues, a really good bluesy band.
I think that's kind of what stoner rock in general is kind of based off of, because like you were saying earlier in the episode, like. It's basically just heavy blues. It's down-tuned blues music.
Exactly. I mean, and we were talked about Sabbath before, and how Sabbath, it all was rooted in the blues, and it wasn't until probably like Judas Priest, maybe even early Queen, where it started to become more not so bluesy and more the chicka 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 chicka.
Right.
The chugging like a choo choo, but. But even like Dead Meadow. Dead Meadow is one of those bands that probably... Well, I've seen one of their songs was on a beer commercial a couple of years ago, which was kind of weird. I mean, hey, whatever.
It's more publicity. I mean, I'm sure they got money out of that.
Absolutely. Brian, who actually was who's in the Alien Tape Recorder, that's one of his favorite bands, is Dead Meadow. And we were talking about blues, and you actually were talking a blues band earlier that I didn't really know if we should bring up, but you had kind of convinced me earlier.
Oh, are you talking about Blue Cheer?
No, I was talking about the other band, Clutch.
Yeah, and that's another thing with me too, is like, as much as I like Clutch, it was kind of weird for me to throw them on this list just because I don't know if it's entirely appropriate. Right. Like, with the first couple records, sure, whatever. The first one might be a little too on the abrasive side, but then especially when you get into the Clutch album, that really starts to show. They got a lot bluesier, and then as time went on, like you go to Elephant Riders blues album, and they've kept that with them, and I think they lost the stoner rock elements more and more as they went on, but they're still like known as a stoner rock band, per se.
And they had that kind of. Where they can play a song and, sing, and then they have a song that will bridge, like a instrumental will bridge that song between the next song. And that's where, like, Tim and the drummer, where they shine. Because the drummer, I actually heard the drummer was a jazz player or some sorts of that. Like, he was really into doing stuff with the drums. Like, he actually is a really... big fan of the drums. He's not just some idiot back there.
Yeah.
Like
Lars Ulrich. Shots fired! Pew pew! Wait, hey, you guys hear that? You guys hear that from outside? I think those are shots being fired.
Lars. I don't know, dude. You say what you want. That band went...
Yeah, I still use Napster. Come at me.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I mean, does Napster even exist anymore? I don't know. But...
I wasn't a fan, or I wasn't really known to Clutch really until we actually became friends. And ever since then, I started listening more and more Clutch. And I don't have their studio albums, but I do have a good chunk of their live albums. The Full Fathom 5 one, the Live from Flint, Michigan, and the Live at the 930 Club.
930 Club.
Actually,
that's my favorite one.
That's the one where they play the entire self-titled one, right? Yep. Space Grass Man, and Tim versus the Greys.
Yeah, or I Have the Body of John Wilkes Booth.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they're hilarious song titles, but man, is that music like just absolutely killer. I mean, they were still punchy while still being like a stoner rock band. Like take a song like Animal Farm, for example. That's a blues riff just sped up.
Right. And they were, and like I had mentioned before about Pete and the harmonica. These guys fucking love Neil Fallon, man. He loves the fucking harmonica. He finds any way just to bring the harmonica in. Actually, we had mentioned Mountain before, but did you know that Mountain Leslie West actually played on one of the Clutch albums? Yeah.
Wait, really?
Yes. I'm not exactly sure 100% which album it was, but he did guest on one of the Clutch albums.
I'll have to look into that because
Yeah. See, so that's an ode to the gods.
Yep.
From the past to the here's a tip of the hat to you.
hats off, and then
Hats off.
they're kind of passing the baton.
Yeah, but when it all comes down to, we had mentioned it before, the stoner rock is really rooted in the blues. I mean, there is a few of those bands, like we mentioned with Earthless, or we had mentioned with the Hawkwind, or we had mentioned with Sleep and Dope Smoker, that take it somewhere else. And that's not saying that's a bad thing. That's them actually doing something different. That's them doing them. That's not them doing somebody else.
Absolutely.
So, but I really think stoner rock is not a dying breed. It's not a dying scene. I think that it's very prominent amongst fans today. I mean,
yeah, amongst the fans, but as far as like being engaging and popularized, probably not. I mean,
no,
it's still,
but that's what I love.
but it
about
still thrives, though.
Yeah, it
absolutely.
still does.
It's still an underground scene that thrives.
Yeah,
and looks up to the Godfathers like Sleep and like Caius. And that kind of thing, and deservingly so, because those bands
Monster
kind of
Magnet.
And Monster Magnet too,
absolutely.
for sure.
I mean,
and Tab,
yes, Tab. Anybody could check out Tab. That's an interesting.
Speaking of which, you got any like honorable mentions you want to give to our listeners?
Any honorable mentions? Yeah, because we're gonna wrap it up here in a second. But any honorable mentions? I think Space Ritual from the Hawkwind was a very underrated live album. I think that I didn't really bring it up before when we were talking about them, but they were a very good jazz, prog almost infusion band that had very much punk elements to their attitude and to their style. The Earthless meets Heavy Blanket, that's another good one. If anybody wants to know about Dinosaur Jr., we'll mention them on another podcast in the future, but that is another great band.
Absolutely.
Any honorable mentions from you?
Well, I mean, the ones that really speak out to me the absolute most I mentioned earlier, like, you gotta go listen to Dopes to Infinity. Yeah. You gotta go listen to Holy Mountain. You gotta go listen to Welcome to Sky Valley from Caius.
Yeah. Any of the Desert Sessions. I mean, we will eventually. We are going to be talking about Josh Homme in an episode here, not too far from now, which we will go into more detail on the Desert Sessions. But just for future, Desert Sessions 1 through 10.
I think so, because there's not an 11 and 12 yet.
No, not yet. But as far as like the best ones are probably 1 through 6. And then,
by a mile.
But not even saying that the other ones were bad, because they were awesome. What was it? 7-8 was actually kind of like where they started doing the demos for Songs of the Deaf. There was Hanging Tree was on that one. I'm not sure. Maybe God and the Radio might be in that one.
Oh yeah, because that was a Desert Sessions
one. And Lanigan was on that one. So
yeah,
but. That's another honorable mention. Any of the Desert Sessions were amazing. Across the River demos, which they haven't released anything else from them just as of yet, but the demos I think it's 15 minutes long. It's worth a listen to.
Definitely.
It changed your life, swear to God. But anything else you want to bring up before we skedaddle out of here?
The Sleep Show from 95.
Yeah.
Check that out. It's on YouTube.
Sleep Show from 95, okay.
And, shoot. I can't really think of too much else outside of what I would typically say. Like, I think, even though they're not a stoner rock band, you should still listen to the first Queens album, because that's probably as stoner rock as they got.
I still would say the first 3 Queens of the Stone Age albums, at least the first 3 albums, were stoner.
I don't know, because I feel like they really...
I mean, the Songs of the Deaf alone
to be
was going
around
out
the
to
time
the
Rated
desert.
R. Oh man, we're talking over each other. But
I'm sorry.
I totally... No, it's all good. But like that's the whole point of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, because for me, I think they really found their identity as a band when they became a band.
Right.
And that was when Rated R happened.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I could still see a song like In the Fade being on like a new Queens album, because it just fits with where they're going.
Absolutely. Even you could say that about almost any of those songs in the first 3 albums.
I feel like the Queen self-titled though is
a little bit
just
more
a standalone,
right?
But it's amazing. So go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen to when it comes to Orange Goblin, like first 2 albums. You know, if that conversation interested you at all, I would say first 2 albums.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's it. Because as much as I enjoy the genre, it's not my big thing, but
right.
I appreciate a lot of bands for what they're doing, like
Yeah.
Sleep. I'm sure that was an amazing show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like I said, they've been back together for 6 years, maybe, and they've only played a handful of dates and only recorded one new
here
song.
and there.
Yeah.
Bands just do that.
And like I said, I told the Mooch, I said, we gotta go see this because I don't know if we'll ever see it again unless we have to get in our car and drive somewhere. And I'm not really about doing
or
that.
something like that because Lord knows that they get all the good shows.
So, you done?
I think I've said all I had to say.
I'm done.
You done?
Ready to go, fuckface?
Yeah, I'm ready, retard.
Dickheads.
Until next time, I'm the Great Boudini,
And I'm Sir Sleeps a Lot.
and we'll see you next time.
Sayonara.
Later.
They're just kind of like, oh, you did a good job, look.
Yeah.
Like that scene in Family Guy where it's, I don't remember, edit that part out. I knew it had something to do with the Beatles, though.
Right.
Hey, is this Taylor?
This is Taylor, yeah.
Oh, hey, Taylor. I heard you like blackberry smoke. You know who else likes blackberry smoke?
His name is Johnson. I know this is my fault. But fortunately, I have been drinking tonight, so I'm more than willing to entertain, sir. Yeah. Well? What the fuck is going on, dude? Alright, I'm hanging up now. Please don't call back because I have to get him at the ass crack going for work. If you're a decent fucking human being, you wouldn't call me back. So, yeah. Let's make it a good day. Now, bring on the cheeseburger equals.
episode.